I'll be to the
Well, I thought if I gave you a copy of the wording for the main plaque for today, which you've all got in front of you, I would just confine my remarks to, first of all, to thanking you all, because all of you here, and the reason you've been invited is that you've helped in different ways towards the completion of this enterprise, and I would like to thank you all for the things that you've done. It's not possible to mention you all by name, and then perhaps to ask you to just look at the notice of the wording, which gave me quite a bit of thought. Don't ever be a person responsible for wordings on plaques. It's not an easy task, and I'm quite sure that I haven't got it quite right, but I've done my best to try and get it right. So first of all, you'll see that it is formerly known as Milton Bridge. This is taken from the original documents of 1811, but it's become known as the Lake Milton Viaduct, so that's why we stuck with that name. It's on the Kilmarnock Troon, Scotland's first public railway. Let nobody be in any doubt about the importance of this railway in a number of ways, particularly to Kilmarnock and Troon, as you might expect. Before the Duke of Portland embarked on this very ambitious project of a double-line railway from Kilmarnock down to the new harbour that he also created at Troon, there was really nothing at Troon, I'm told, but an old smuggling inn and a couple of cottages. So Troon really can be considered to owe its creation to this railway and the new harbour. And we know that within 20 to 30 years, even the larger town of Kilmarnock doubled its population. So this railway was of tremendous importance locally to the whole way of life. In engineering terms, Duke of Portland got the best advice that he could get in Britain. He went to the successor of John Smeaton, who built the Eddystone Lighthouse, a man called William Jessop, who was Britain's leading railway engineer in the pre-steam locomotive era, and he got him to design this Kilmarnock Troon Railway and the bridge that you've seen today. And to execute it, he brought in John Simpson, who was one of Telford's most competent stonemasons, who worked on the Caledonian Canal, also with Jessop, and he was brought in to actually build it. So he was the contractor, and the records indicate that it cost just under £4,000 to build. So just think on that, just under £4,000 to build. It's cost us just over £1 million to restore it. Going on next, I've mentioned the Duke of Portland. Without him there wouldn't have been a railway, so you notice that we've put his name in large letters. Without the Duke of Portland there would never have been a railway, and these big improvements to this area would never have come about. William Jessop, we've mentioned. You might say that the trust that was formed to save the viaduct consisted of 4 engineers, the chief elected representatives of the local authorities, and a representative from the Clydesdale Bank. This was our trust. So if we just go on, it says that the railway was closed in 1846 when the railway was realigned with the more modern malleable iron edge rails on the timber viaduct. Some of you may have noticed that just to the south of the present site. You can still see the line of it. And you see that it's been preserved since June of last year by the Conservation Trust, and with a little bit of assistance from Bar Limited. It was initiated originally, some people have asked how did it all come about. It was through the panel of historical engineering works of the Institution of Civil Engineers. We became aware that the viaduct was about to collapse through, well, Ian Johnson was instrumental in drawing it to my attention. He's here somewhere too. Ian played a key role in this enterprise too. Now, we couldn't have succeeded, of course, without having the very great support from the local authorities, and you see there the main contract agent. We couldn't really have done this without having the Strathclyde Regional Council as the employer for the contract. This part of my notice isn't very perfect really. I couldn't find in the few words one's allowed on an iron plaque to explain the distinctions between employers and the contract law, but I would like to say that Strathclyde Regional Council played a very major role in the whole thing. And now, of course, the baton for being our agent for the job was passed over the 1st of April to East Ayrshire Council Roads, and we're obviously very grateful to them for continuing in that role. We now come to Bar Limited. Now, we felt that Bar should be really put on a par with the Duke of Portland in this context, as being one of the essential contributors to the success of this enterprise. As you see, the names that we've put largest are in fact those of the engineers and the main projector. And I have to say, and I'm sure you'll all agree, having seen the Viaduct this morning and all that we've seen, that Bar Limited have done an excellent job. And I think, I hope you would all agree that that's the case. We on the Trust are delighted with what we've seen. Just a word about our funders. The National Heritage Memorial Fund sent me a very nice letter saying that, that although they were unable to be represented, they felt that it was a very worthwhile project, and they'd been very pleased to be able to support it. Historic Scotland was a major funder, European Union, Strathclyde Regional Council, Cairn and Carrick District Council, Kilmarnock and Loudoun, and Enterprise Ayrshire. Without these people, ladies and gentlemen, there wouldn't have been any project, and we are greatly indebted to them for their invaluable support. I also mentioned some other supporters without which we wouldn't have been able to do the project. You'll see they're supported by David Caldwell, who's with us today, who sold the directors of the Trust the Viaduct, or sharing it for £1, and also James Miller and family. We're also delighted to have them here today, and particularly to thank them, and we've marked their contribution by putting their names on the plaque. Without them there wouldn't have been any scheme, and thank you. Also, it's very important with the Trust to have a good banker, and we've had a very good one in Paul Hearn and the Clydesdale Bank, and we would particularly like to thank you, Paul, wherever you are, for all your efforts and contribution, which I might say has gone far more than one would just expect of a banker. Paul, in fact, is a lawyer, and he's been greatly helpful to me on a number of occasions with all the legal side that we've had to go through on the Trust to get the project to this stage. You'll appreciate that we couldn't get any of the major monies for this project without actually owning the Viaduct, and we couldn't even find out who was the owner to start with. Nobody wanted to admit to being the owner, and it eventually devolved on the two farmers because of their riparian ownership rights, and they conveyed their share in the interest of the Viaduct to us. So without, you can imagine there's a lot of legal proceedings to be gone through. So thank you, Paul, to you for all your efforts in that. Well, last but by no means least is our great opening today. We were absolutely delighted when the two provosts of South Ayrshire and East Ayrshire agreed that they would jointly do the opening. As you all know, the boundary of their area runs down the middle of the river, so they've each got a stake in it. My interest in history has always been a positive one, and has always had a sort of future angle to it. And I would just like to conclude by thanking them and saying that it's the hope that the Trust have really done their part in providing the Viaduct. You might feel that the accesses to it are not all that adequate, but as the Chairman has said to me many times, this is no business of ours, you see, the actual accesses to the Viaduct. But we do hope that now that the Viaduct has been provided for the future, that you will, now that you've got this wonderful asset, that you'll make sure that everything possible is done to make the knowledge of the Viaduct and its significance known to as many people as possible, and to see if your local authorities could do something to improve the accessibility to it from each side to the actual viaduct. I don't think this would be a very expensive, nothing like the expense of actually restoring the viaduct. And perhaps, ladies and gentlemen, and Provost, I should say, I could leave you with that thought. It's now my very pleasant duty to call on my friend and our contractor, Bill Barr, to say a few words to you about the construction of the viaduct. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Roland. Lord Howie, Provost, ladies and gentlemen. Standing here as I am physically positioned at the moment, I feel a little bit like the man who sat on the fence, so very, very long that the iron got into his soul. And that was apropos nothing, but I do feel a bit divided standing here as Roland has done. Now, I've been involved with many projects in my life, but I must say that the restoration of Laigh Milton Viaduct genuinely ranks very, very highly alongside the Three Bridge in Galloway, which was the other project which my good colleague John Kelly was involved in as well some 10 or more years ago. This particular job was of course carried out on the more modern design and construct principle. And we could talk about that all afternoon as to whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. I felt greatly privileged and honoured when I was asked by the panel for Historic Engineering Works to chair the initial committee of the Trust to see if we could get this project moving. The early days were difficult, as probably been alluded to by a number of people today. Raising the money was quite a task. When we approached the stage of thinking about receiving tenders for the works, I was very, very happy to pass the chairmanship of the Trust to Lord Howie, who of course has origins here in Ayrshire and Troon, and is someone I think whom I've known for about 22 years. Lord Howie, or Will as we know him, as we all know him, has done a most excellent job in bringing the project to fruition today, and we are all very, very grateful to you, Will, for your efforts on behalf of your native Ayrshire and of Scotland and of engineering, civil engineering in general. Now, Roland has quite correctly thanked the organisations who are involved, and I didn't intend to say very much, but I just feel that I must say a personal thanks to quite a number of individuals, because without these individuals within the organisations who elected to support us, we would have nowhere, because it's this case, isn't it always, when you're trying to get something moving, that you've either got a spirit of enthusiasm around the table or you haven't. And I can assure you, all of you, that we had a great spirit of enthusiasm from many people, from many different almost walks of life, when we came together as a trust to try and put this show on the road. Ayrshire now has historical engineering works in the form of Laigh Milton Viaduct, which will be of tremendous value to generations in the future. Someone said that what we owe to the future is the debt we owe to the past. In the future is important to us all and to our children. In the early days, the project would not have got off the ground without the assistance, of course, of the organisations, as Roland has said, and I just say it again because I think it is worth saying it twice. Kilmarnock District Council, Kilmarnock and Loudoun District Council, Strathclyde Regional Council, Historic Scotland, Clydesdale Bank, the National Heritage Memorial Trust, Enterprise Ayrshire, and many other organisations, too numerous to mention. In the more recent times, we are delighted to have had the support of the new South Ayrshire Council and the new East Ayrshire Council. And I'm absolutely delighted today that Provost Robert Campbell of South Ayrshire Council and Provost Robert Stirling were able jointly to open our very own viaduct. Now, within bars, I would like to pay tribute, if you don't mind, to some of my colleagues who've worked extremely hard to just make sure, first of all, that the aqueduct, the viaduct, did not fall into the river, and I can assure you that was a real cause for concern, and particularly with regard to the one arch. And colleagues from Bars, I really pay tribute to John Kelly, of course, David Lawson, Brian McClure, Alec Hammond, David Cree, Sandy Robertson. Can I just say thank you all, and if I've missed anyone, my apology. Peter Longman and Walter McFarlane, formerly with Strathclyde Regional Council, played a very important part. And I'm delighted to see Walter here today. I've worked with Walter for a very long time. I can see he's enjoying his retirement, and I do admire his new tie. Well, you must have a look at Walter's new tie. Retirement's made him a new man. Ian Brown was with Strathclyde at a very crucial stage in their deliberations, and I now understand that he's seen the light and switched his allegiance to South Lanarkshire. We just want you to remember all the time that we're your new near neighbours, Ian. We've got to go through you to get out of Ayrshire. And of course the landowners, and without their cooperation, and I mean it is a very brave thing to do, to allow some contractor to come stamping through your yard and over your land to get to a project like this. And without your support as the landowners, it would have been totally and absolutely impossible. Now there's a number of people who served certainly during my chairmanship of the Trust, whom I think have become friends through it. Ex-Provost Danny McNeill is here today, our Secretary of course Roland, our Treasurer Paul Heron, as you've heard about already. Councillor Lambie is here today, and also Ian Johnston, and Robert Mond was here until earlier from the previously the planning side at Strathclyde. Councillor Robert Campbell, who's been a consistent supporter of the project. All these people, I just say to you all, a very personal thanks. And I'll leave you with a thought. What would Robert Burns have thought? You would expect me to say this, wouldn't you? What would Robert Burns have thought, Roland, about today? I think he would have gone off and penned some lines, maybe scratched them in the window over there, about the sort of hard-working nature of the Trust Committee, and maybe said a little bit about John Kelly and his colleagues, and David Lawson and others who built the thing. And what would Thomas Telford have said? Thomas Telford, of course, the first president of our institution, born at Esdale near Langham. He would have been very proud, gentlemen, of what you've all achieved. Can I just say thank you very much.
Is a continuation of the poem which was read at the inauguration of the bridge when the first stone was moved. And this particular poem today was written in anticipation of today, and it was right when it talks about the good weather at the beginning, but some of the other things you have to make allowances for because they didn't actually happen. And it's very difficult to write. It's all right for Robert Burns could write the thing there and then, you see. And sometimes one suspects that even Robert Burns was like Sir Walter Scott and had this thing up his sleeve beforehand, you know. Anyway, it's called On Such a Day. On such a day, the farm cock crows, a casual wind, bed-quilt cloud blows. All the air awakes, tilts to the sun, her wheel spoke rays, warm farm and town. Where industry laid busy rails, our old brig stands, no longer frail. Her stones are sharp, her arches mend, the cutwaters, the spates they fend. On parapets, blue ribbons fly, artful rosettes on white poles high. Only a tape now bars the way, where once the thorn had its own way. Today they come, builders and co, the councillors, a media show. A speech is made, gold scissors snip, and all may walk, our assets strip. Success to the late Milton Viaduct.
To do, I think, and that is to finish off the final account with Bill Barr.
No, not me. David Lawson, John Kelly.
So, as I've said many times in the course of our deliberations while I was chairman. It's got nothing whatever to do with me. But it is good to see this project. I saw the bridge when it was covered in bushes of one sort and another, and it was suggested to us that in order to preserve some kind of historical continuity, we should put plants along the parapet, and I suggested that we wanted a bridge and not a window box, and I'm happy to say I got my own way. We got a bridge, and I wondered, I always knew that it would come to fruition, but I always wondered what it would really look like when it was finished. Because it was fairly tatty when we got our hands on it in the first place. And I came along yesterday afternoon, which you'll remember. Yesterday was a very, very wet and rather, well, a very familiar kind of a day in this part of the world. I came along, I'd been up in the Highlands, I came through rain and God knows what, and I came round here. I tried to get to the bridge from Irvine, but I couldn't find any way to get out of Irvine now that it's a new town. One thing they've got in Irvine, and they're very good at it, they've got roundabouts. And round you go. And I couldn't find them, and then I said, oh, hang on here, I know the way from Dundonald. So I went up to Dundonald and came round. And I noticed that coming down in the train this morning, I got a taxi at Irvine Station, and the taxi driver didn't know quite the way. He didn't know how to get out of Irvine either. He lived here. He actually came round by Dundonald as they approached the bridge, and I was able to guide him on the last part of the trip. But as I say, yesterday afternoon it had been raining and dark and glowering and everything all day, and I stood just over there near where the big notice board is with everybody's name on it, and the rain went off. And it was dry for about a quarter of an hour. And I just stood there and looked at the bridge, and really looked at it from here, which I suppose is where most people will see it. It does look very beautiful. It's a bit cleaner than it used to be, but no doubt time will change all that. It is really a very successful endeavour, and I'm very pleased to have been concerned with it. As the chairman, of course, I take all the credit. And the work is done by others. Several of them have been named, and I won't really go through that again, but let me say this. Several times the words, nothing could have been done without someone or other, but nothing could have been done without Professor Paxton. Roland carried this on his shoulders most of the way. I know the contractor did his bit as well, but that was different. I'm talking now about the trust side of it. Roland carried this thing, and he would come on the telephone to me from time to time, and he would give me a brief message lasting about 3/4 of an hour until I sort of fainted, and then he realised something up and he'd stop. But he did it all. He put up the suggestions, and I usually agreed with him and said, that's a good idea, Roland, just you go and do it. And that's what he did. He went and did it. So a very great body of credit goes to Professor Roland Paxton. I'm very pleased to be able to say that to him publicly. And I would like to add just one other word to the two families without which this couldn't be done. It's been said already, but nothing could have been done without the two farmers. You couldn't have got at the bridge in the first place, except for their help. I think it's fair to say they were just a little reluctant at first, but they knew the serious history of the bridge, and they realised that what we were trying to do was something which was really useful, and useful in the historical context in our part of Ayrshire here. And they were very cooperative and very, very helpful, and I give my own personal thanks to them as well as the generalised thanks of the Trust. Now I've only one last thing to do, and you might not all be able to do it, because what I'm going to do is to propose a toast to the bridge. And I've managed to get a glass of wine for myself. because I'm very careful and forward-looking. But we plan ahead. If you've got anything to toast the bridge in, will you toast it? If you haven't, just wave your hand in the general direction of the bridge and wish it well. A toast to the future of the Lake Milton Viaduct. God bless it.
Lake Milton Viaduct.